Morning. Good morning. We'll give you another minute for everybody to come on. And we'll share the screen so someone who doesn't have a copy, we'll put it on. What's the time? 10:01. Let's get going. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So we're starting with 4 weeks, just under 4 weeks till special day of Yud Shvat. So there's an initiative among Tanash in England to learn the Maimonim of Yud Shvat. It's also 70 years from the Rebbe's first mimer that he said, Yud Shvat Toshin Yud Aleph. So it's a very special anniversary of the Kabbalas and the Siyas. So what we've done is, we have 4 weeks. We're going to do 2 weeks. We're going to do the mimer of Yud Shvat, Toshin Mem Aleph, and maybe go into Chof Aleph if we have time. And then there's going to be 2 weeks of the mimer of Toshin Yud Aleph, of what's called the inaugural mimer, very geschmack mimer. Okay, so the mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe, as we know, the Frierdiker Rebbe gave out the mimer for Shabbos Yud Shvat, Kunturis Yud Gimel Shvat, which is the yard site of Frierdiker Rebbe's grandmother, the Rebbe Rivka, on Yud Shvat, and then Frierdiker Rebbe's mother on Yud Gimel Shvat. So he gave out a mimer. The mimer was originally, he took a Ksav Yad from a mimer that the Frierdiker Rebbe said in Tafresh Pei Gimel, and he did some changes. He added the beginning, Bosi Legani, and those are the 2 Maimorim that came out in the original Kuntres. And then there was Yud Shvat, the Stalkos. So the Rebbe continued. There was another 10 chapters left. So the Rebbe, it wasn't divided yet into chapters. The Rebbe divided it, if I remember correctly, divided them into 10 chapters, and he gave one mimer for Purim and one for Beis Nissen, and the whole mimer is 20 chapters. And every year, subsequently, the Rebbe would say a mimer on Yud Shvat based on one of these parokim of Bosi Legani. And then he finished in Toshin Lamed and started again in Toshin Lamed Aleph. So this year we are holding chapter 11 of the 5th cycle. So the mimer which we have, so there's Maimorim from Toshin Chof Aleph, and Toshin Mem Aleph is Maimorim that we have. Toshin Chof Aleph Yud Shvat was on a Shabbos like this year, so there was a mimer Friday night, and there was a mimer Shabbos. It was Shabbos B'Shalach. This year it's Shabbos Boy. Shabbos Boy is a rarity. The fact that it happened at Yud Shvat Toshin Yud is a rarity. So it was Shabbos B'Shalach and Toshin Chof Aleph, and then there was a mimer Motzei Shabbos when the big Yud Shvat Fabrengen. When the Rebbe would say the mimer Friday night, it used to be after Kabbalah Shabbos before Ma'ariv. It means there was after Kegavna or before Kegavna, I don't remember. I once asked someone. And then the Rebbe would go from his place, would go to the table to sit down. And in later years, there was already the big shul downstairs. In the earlier years, when it happened, it would be right near where the Rebbe stood. And they would sit down in his place, and they would sing a niggin, and the Rebbe would say a mimer. And then they would continue Ma'ariv. And that's why in the mimer from Toshin Chof Aleph, Friday night, it says after Kabbalah Shabbos. Anyway, this was Yud Shvat Toshin Mem Aleph, which was a Thursday night. So the first 3 paragraphs is a précis of the mimer for Toshin Yud. So we can do that a little bit quicker, but we'll give some explanation of stuff that's unique to Toshin Mem Aleph. So the mimer is based on the pasuk Bosi Legani Achesi Kalo. Come to the garden of my sister, my bride. A pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Yidua mimer shel Balei Lulo. So it's known the mimer of the Balei Lulo. Shetzia Leil Kras City Year Kedesh, which he gave out for Yud Shvat, and here the Rebbe paraphrases the pasuk that speaks about Ma'aser and Behema, who are city the 10th year Kedesh, and Pachas B'Chukesai. So the Rebbe gave out for that city year Kedesh, which is Yud Shvat Yemi Stalkus Shalei And therefore, in brackets, he says this isn't just an event that happened in the past, but that it repeats itself and reawakens. Neir reawakens itself. Not the histalkus part, but all of the special schusim of that day, based on what the Rebbe said many times from the pasuk in Megillah Esther, Hayom Eila Niskorim V'Nasim. The Megillah says that it's not just that we commemorate these days in remembering what happened in the past. The Megillah adds an extra word, not just Niskorim that we commemorate, but V'Nasim that actually reoccur. So all of those special things that happen on that Yud Shvat, as is explained in Igeres HaKedesh of the Alter Rebbe for the Histalkus of Chav Zayin, in Igeres Chav Zayin, and as the Rebbe explained over the years, the day of the Histalkus of a tzaddik like Rebbe Shimon ben Yochai is a day that he reached the highest levels and so on. All of those things, Niskonim V'Nasim, Chayzev V'Neir, Niskonim V'Nasim, B'dei Shana B'Shana. So maybe it's a Maimer Shashir Ashirim Rabos. Over there he brings the Maimer, the quote from Medrash on Shir Ashirim, that the Eibishter Shakadosh Baruch Hu, but the Eibishter is the one who's saying Bosi Legani Legnuni. The Eibishter is the one who's saying it. That he's returning Legnuni. Lemokim Shahoy Ikri B'Tchila. He's returning to his place of delight, says the Medrash, to the place where the Eibishter was originally. When was it originally? B'Shas B'Riyas Ha'olam. That's what the Eibishter was. Not just was the Eibishter there, but the Medrash used the term Ikri. The Iker of the Eibishter was there at the beginning. What's the Iker of the Eibishter? So he says the Iker Shechina b'tachtenim hoy. So the Iker, the Eibishter, is the main part of his Shechina. And the main part of his Shechina, the beginning of creation, was here in this world, in the tachtenim. Unfortunately, Lachari came. They might built to the Tzuyim as a result of negative actions. Nasa Siluk HaShechina, Milamatalamaila the Shechina, was banished from below upwards. To the extent, Shadei Shiva and Yonim, Istalka Shechina L'Rekiya Shvi, as a result of 7 in Yonim, the Shechina had to pass on and move up to the Rekiya Shvi, the 7th heaven. Then came along Tzadikim. They brought the Shechina down from upwards downwards. Beginning from the 7th heaven, until it came down to this world. Where do we know that it came down to this world? And this is the function of Tzadikim. So he says there in the Maimers, it's written in Pasuk, Tzadikim yishkinu la'ad aleha. The tzaddikim, so the literal meaning of the pasuk is that tzaddikim are dwelling in this world la'ad, eternally. There's always tzaddikim, but he explains over there in the Maimer that the tzaddikim are the ones who are mashkin la'ad. They're the ones who bring down the level of la'ad. What's the Eibishter's level of la'ad? What's the Eibishter's level of la'ad? B'chinas sheichinat, the level of the Eibishter, which we say in Davening, sheichinat. So the tzaddikim are the one who bring down this level of the Shekhinah back down into this world. So there were 7 such tzaddikim, and the 7th one ad until Moshe Rabbeinu Shu Hashvi, he was the 7th, and he says over there in the original Maimer, it's in parentheses, V'chol Hashvin Chavir, which of course the Rebbe spends time on in the first Maimer, Tafshin Yud Aleph. So through Moshe Rabbeinu, who he was Kol Hashvi, he was the Shvi, Shal Yodei Nasa B'Peil Inyan Devayered Havai Al Har Sinai. So it was through Moshe Rabbeinu that it was achieved. B'Peil, in reality, the idea of the Eibishter coming down, the reality of the Eibishter coming down, and as we see in Pasuk, it says, Vayered Hashem Al Har Sinai. However, hold on over here. How do we move this? Let's move this out of the way. Sorry, 1 second. Yep. I have to get used to that. Okay. I know how I'm going to do this. 1 second. Bear with me. Move this to the side over here. Okay. That's what we're up to. So that's very good. So the Shekhinah came down to Har Sinai. But how are we going to see to it that Har Sinai Shekhinah came, and we know that after Matan Torah the Shekhinah left? And the goal is to achieve the Shekhinah should remain in this world. So he says, in order that the Shekhinah should afterwards come down on a permanent basis, for that there was the command. That's the command that the Eibishter gave. You should make for me a mikdash, a sanctuary, and over there, I will dwell in them. This pasuk is the Migdash Seicham. This is the whole mission of making a mishkan, a mishkan for the Eibishter. Even though it says, I will dwell b'seicham amongst them. And we have an Azal that says, what does b'seicham mean? The Eibishter only commanded to make one mishkan. So what's the pasuk telling in the plural? So the Azal tell us, it means b'seich kolechet v'achas. It means within each individual. That the real Mishkan is not just the Mishkan of wood and curtains as it was then, but it means within every single Yid. So even though Veshachanti B'Seicha means B'Seicha Lechet V'Achas, how does every individual become a Mishkan for the Eibishter? Because there's the big general Mishkan. So this Asiyas Mishkan is the Ikri Migdash. This is what's called the Migdash, because Shabei Sheda Shechina El Yena, because that's where the Shechina El Yena, the supreme Shechina rests, the level of Yishkul Alad Aleh that we mentioned a few earlier, and therefore it's called the Migdash, coming from the word Kedesh, the place that's holy. Okay. Now, there's an interesting thing over here to point out, which isn't in the Ma'amar Bosi Legani, but it's here in this footnote of number 12 over here, as you see. This, we're very familiar with this word. The Rebbe chazed it many, many times. V'shachanti b'seicham, b'seichai loy ne'emar. What does it mean? B'seich kolechet v'echad, or b'seich kolechet v'achas, right? Where is this Ma'amar Azal? We say it often. So here, they bring, it's not Muga this Ma'amar, but the Ha'ara is from a Muga de Kesich, which I'll share with you in a minute. So you see here number 12. So this Ma'amar Razal, Huva B'Shem Razal, it's first brought in the name of Razal in Likutei Torah. The Alter Rebbe says it in Likutei Torah, but there is no recorded mention of where in Razal. Now, normally, Razal would refer to Mishnah, Gemara, and Medrash. Here, the Alter Rebbe is quoting it in Tanya, in Likutei Torah, from Razal. Who is Razal? So here the Rebbe says an interesting thing. The Rebbe says he brings different Ma'amar Kemis. Okay, what's behind this Hara? So that you got to look in Chelik Chavav, Amud 173. So Chelik Chavav, Amud 173, Hara 45. The Rebbe says an interesting thing over here. I don't have it up on the screen, but I'll share it. I'll read it to you. So the Rebbe, it's a Sichan Pashas Truma. Now this Sichan Pashas Truma was the Likut was for Tafshin. Truma Aleph was published for Tafshin Memhei. Important to remember that. I'll tell you why in a minute. So this is Truma 1985, Tafshin Memhei. So the Rebbe quotes in Parshas Truma where the pasuk Vasili Migdash V'Shechanti B'Seichem is first mentioned, and he quotes the word of the Alter Rebbe that Amr Razal. So the Rebbe writes, "Kain du Lashon Admur Azakin." That's what the Alter Rebbe writes in the Likutei Torah. Ulaeis Ata. So far, the Rebbe says, I only found it in the Shalom in Parshas Truma. He doesn't. There's no Gemara. There's no Medrash. I only found in the Shalom. So the Rebbe says the Shalom is also included in the word Razal. The Shalom, even though he's much, much recent, the Razal. The Rebbe is. If you mean problem. Shade of hand. Now in the Zoya, man the Nafach mit Teichen Nafach. So here the Alter Rebbe says Razal. The Alter Rebbe knew Razal. So the Rebbe says that the earliest he found it is the Shalom. I'm getting signals up here. Can you hear me? You can see me. You can hear me.
We can hear you. You were just breaking up a little bit.
Okay. I don't know why. Yeah, I'm getting low system resource. Ik weet niet wat dat meant. I'm getting full bars over. Anyway, as long as you can see me, good, and hear me. So the Rebbe says he finds it in the Shalom. Velifin is in a sefer that is an abbreviation of Reish Ches. Maybe it's Rabbeinu Chananel. I don't know. Shara Ava. I could be wrong. I don't know what that is. So therefore, the Rebbe says V'gamze Nichlal Beloshon Razal. So the Shalom is also included in the Lashon of Razal. Why? The Rebbe says Befrat Shedivrei Shalom Huvu B'Kamam Kemis L'Psak Din, because the Shalom, some of his words are sometimes brought out as a Psak Din, and he brings from the Mogen Avram. The Mogen Avram begins his Chibur on the Shulchan Aruch with a quote with words from the Shalom. And then he brings in the Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Talmud Torah. The Rebbe brings in this footnote that the Alter Rebbe says that the words of the Shalah have the takeif of a Mishnah. Okay? So therefore, the Shalah qualifies as a Razal. Now, at the end of this footnote, in Chelik Havav, page 173, he refers to page 83 earlier. Now, 83 is a Sicha on Parshas Boy. And the Sicha on Parshas Boy was published a year later. Okay? And the Sicha on Parshas Boy is already published in Tafshin Memvov. So it's a year later. Now, in that Sicha in Parshas Boy, page 83, Ha'arav 49, over there he brings again the Marmok and Loshen Azal, and he says Omr Azal, and he brings from Shana Haver again. He brings from the Al Shich and the Shalal. But a year later, the Rebbe adds on these words, La'es Atam Matzosiv Bashalom. A year later, the Rebbe writes that he's already searched. So the previous year, it went by with the regular Mar Mekemis. I think the Al Shich was before the Shalom. And a year later, in the Likot of Truma Aleph, this page 1, this Chel Chavav 173, the Rebbe already brings down La'es Ata. He's already searched. It's been a year. A year earlier. This was a year earlier. Okay. Anyway, so that's just the background. Interesting to know. So we say this is based on the Shalom. Okay. And he continues in the Maimer. So now that we've established that we need the Mishkan in order to be able to develop the Mishkan within ourselves, we need to have the Gashmizdike Mishkan of wood and curtains. So he says, Inyan Ikri Mishkan, what's a fundamental? What was the composition of the Mishkan? Inyan Ikri the Mishkan was Mashakosov, also Vasisa, Sakroshim, the Mishkan, Atzishitim Eindim. This is again, we're going now into Perik Gimel and Dalad and so on of the Maimer of Bosi Legani Toshin Yud, that the Mishkan was made from Kroshim, and the Kroshim were made from Atzishitim. Should take the say Sakroshim, Atzishitim. That the kroshim were made from shittim wood. So what's the significance of shittim wood? The shemahapchim is a shtus, shittim elosh shtus, v'hasheker, keresh is sheker, the ilam hazeh. The kroshim were called kroshim because he explains that keresh is the word sheker, and our job is to transform the lie of the world, and they're made of shittim wood because shittim is shtus, to transform the shtus and the sheker of ilam hazeh, and to make them into kroshim la mishkan, and not just kroshim la mishkan, but to make them in the way of oimdim. That's very significant, that the Kroshim was standing. If you ever look at any of the picture of log cabins, how did they used to make log cabins? So the pashtus, it makes sense. They pile the logs up that way, horizontally. That's the way we make a log cabin. The Mishkan is much more difficult to make when you're standing up the pieces of wood standing. There was significance in that. But even the Eimdim, Shinyin Amida Meira La Tekif, the Heder Hashini. Amida symbolizes strength, Tekif, and permanence. And that is what symbolizes all of the Maisa of Tachtenim, our work down here, in our work in making a Diraleis Baruch B'Tachtenim. And therefore by transforming the Shtus and the Sheker of the world and doing it in a way of permanence, that is how we make a Dirah B'Tachtenim, and that is what fulfills the Rotzen of the Eibishter. What was the Eibishter's Rotzen? The Taiva, Nisava, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Li is like Dirah B'Tachtenim. That is more or less what he says in the first Maimer of Bosi Legani. Then he continues in the second Maimer of Yeshavas Baganim, Umeisiv Ba Maimer, Shebishvil Zeh. Right, so Perik Yud, last year's Perik. So we jump to the end of the second Maimer. So the Friedrich Rebbe continues, in order to achieve this, to achieve that the Tachtin should be a Dirah Yizbarech, in order to do that, Yesh Tzerech B'Tzivis Havaya. There needs to be Tzivis Hashem. Who are the Tzivis Hashem? Sheheim B'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael are called Tzivos. When are they called Tzivos? Shenikro Kein L'Rishayna B'Tzeis Meretz Mitzrayim. The first time the Yidden are called Tzivos is the first time is when they're leaving. Is when they're leaving Mitzrayim. This goes very quick. No. Sorry about this. No. Oh, sorry. I'm up here, aren't I? Yeah. Here we go. We get the whole paragraph in. So the first time they're called so is the Tzvois is Shenikach and L'Shem B'Tzeis Meretz Mitzrayim. Tzeis Eretz Mitzrayim includes not just the geographical and literal Yitzias Mitzrayim that happened back then, but this includes also Gam HaYitzias MaMitzorim HaGvulim Shel Elim Hazeh HaTachton. It applies to us today. And the Rebbe here is referring to what we should already understand from previous. No, that is the message, the lesson of Yitzias Mitzrayim. What the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, he adds the words to B'chol over there. The Alter Rebbe adds the words B'chol Yom V'Yom. We have to be Yitzias Mitzrayim every day. What's the Yitzias Mitzrayim every day? Yitzia from Mitzorim Ugvulim of Elam Hazeh HaTachton, to free ourselves from the limitations of Elam Hazeh. So therefore, when are Yidden called Tzivos Hashem? When they're leaving Mitzrayim, the literal leaving of exiting of Mitzrayim, exodusing from Mitzrayim, then and the daily Yitzias Mitzrayim, when a Yid is able to achieve within himself or herself a Yitzias Mitzrayim, it's called Tzivos Hashem. What's the significance of the name Tzivos? So in the word Tzava, there are three interpretations. You have Tzava Loshen Chayil, and this is what the Friedrich Rebbe introduced in last year's Perek Yud. You have Tzava comes from the word Chayil, and he brings a pasuk for it. Chayil, army. So that how does that refer to Yidden as an army? That the Aveda of Yidden of Yitzias Mitzrayim is done in a way like an army. What's the way of an army? The Indian of an officer in the army, a soldier in the army is Shemeis Nafsh. He's even ready to be Meisei his nefesh for the Melech. He's not a person on his own, but he's part of an army, and there's a mission and there's a goal, even to the point of Mesiras Nefesh for the Melech. Why? Because the Melech is Reish HaTzava. He is the head of the army. He's the commander for the army. So the Yidden leaving Mitzrayim are ready to go into the Midbar, as we say in the Haggadah. They didn't take any bread, they didn't take any tzeidah, so they didn't even make any, they didn't prepare it. We're going, whatever the commander says, that's what we're doing. That's one pirush of the word tzava. The second pirush is tzava, loshen zman mugbal. The word tzava also has a different context completely. And that is again, he brings down a pasuk, which means a limited amount, a limited time, or an appointed time. So how does this apply to Tzivos Hashem as Yidden? That Tzivos Hashem refers to Yidden when they have a specific designated times serving the Eibishter. And then there's the third interpretation of Tzava. V'agimel is Meloshen Tzivyon. Tzivyon means form, or he brings Tzivyon means form. So, for example, nivru, that they were created in their form. The different creations, their forms. So the lashon Tzivyon means form. Nivru. This is the beauty. When we say form, it also comes from the word tseva, which means color, but not one color, but rather when you have a harmony of different colors coming together, a blend of different colors coming together, this already creates pe'er and tiferes, which we know as yefi, as beauty, which comes from hiskalos of kamagvonim, a conglomeration of kamagvonim, different shades of different colors. Same thing as Yidden. Well, Yidden also, we're not all the same. Everybody's very different. Same day, same Shavuos, as we know, no two Yidden have the same opinion. There's very varied differences amongst Yidden. The Torah itself testifies to that. When it says in Atem Nitzavim, it says, it already tells us 10 classes of Yidden. Midar Shechem, from the head of Shechem, Ad Shev Memechel, down to even the water carriers. So Yidden have very different shades, and many different shades, and are very varied. And yet, Ra'afal Pikein, the beauty, when they become Tzivos Hashem, Tzivos, as he says here, the third one, Meloshen Tzivyon is when we're able to join together in a common mission and a common goal, that's what we're called, Tzivos Hashem. Not just mitzdarfim kulam yachad, but mitzdarfim in a way shenitzovim. Nitzovim means standing firmly. Amida betekev shel tzava. When we're able to stand firmly, lifnei avaya lekechem, as it says there in the pasuk. And then we're able to join together and stand firmly in our mission before the Eibishter. That is how we're able to fulfill the shlichus. Fulfilling the shlichus is therefore done in a way where Yidden will be going out of Mitzrayim, the personal Mitzrayim, the general Mitzrayim, biyad Rama, with an outstretched arm. That's what he says. That's a praise of the first 10 chapters of the Maimer Bosi Legani of Tafshin Yud. And now the Rebbe is going to explain the Maimer of Perek Yud Aleph. That's what we're up to here, Perek Beis. So so he continues in the Maimer, and now we're going to quote. The Rebbe is going to quote from Perek Yud Aleph of the original Bosi Legani, and then give his explanations. He's going to do that a few times now. This is how the Perek Yud Aleph begins. So the Friedrich continues in order to understand deeper. Till now, he mentioned, and he was the subject of Perek Yud or something else, and then he mentions in passing Tzivis Hashem as an introduction to the next part of the Maimer. Now he continues to explain it more in depth. To understand more in depth what Yisrael are called Tzivis Havaya, the Shem Tzvois. So to start with, Shem Tzvois is Shem Kodesh. It's one of the holy names of the Eibishter. It's one of the 7 names that are not allowed to be erased. That's why sometimes it's interesting. And when the Rebbe started Tzivis Hashem 40 years ago, the Rebbe called it Tzivis Hashem Bepashtas. You had sometimes people by dollars, Polish Yidden, Fruma Yidden came, and he says to the Rebbe that his son is a member in Tzvokos Hashem. They call it Tzvokos because we know it's one of the Shemesh She'enim Nimchokim. But in any case, the Rebbe didn't have a problem with that. It's on the logos, it's printed. So there's a discussion about it, what level of kedusha it has. Not for now. But the Friedrich Rebbe here in this Maimer is taking is one of the Shemesh She'enim Nimchokim. So the Rebbe explains since a person, a human, a Yid, is, as the Novi Yeshaya says, Edam Elyon. Compare that we know that Adam was called Adam. The simple pshat of why Adam was called Adam is because he came from an Hadama. So it says in Chumash in Parshas Bereshis. There's a deeper meaning of Adam is the Novi says Edam Elyon, that I am comparable, that a human being, a Yid, is Edam Elyon to the Eibishter. Edam means dimion, a comparison, or the model of. And therefore, they move on. If Yidden are called Tzivis Hashem, and Yidden are Edam Elyon, so there's an element of Tzava by Yidden, that means there must be an element of Tzava by the Eibishter too, because we're created in his image. That's what he's going to tell us now. Therefore, they move on. We can extrapolate from that. This name of Tzivis Hashem, which is Bnei Yisrael are called, and Bnei Yisrael are who? Adam Atachtein. The same thing must apply. Yesh Negam, Adam Elyon. It must also be an Adam Elyon. What would it be an Adam Elyon? We've explained till now that there's 3 interpretations of Tzava and how it applies to Yidden. How does it apply in the Eibishter? So he says, so therefore the Rebbe says that's why the Friedrich is coming to explain. The name Tzivis Hashem, which we are called over here, is connected to the Eibishter's name of Tzvois. There's an Eibishter also has a name Tzvois. What is that? Shem Kodesh. Not just the Eibishter has a name. The Eibishter has many different names, as we'll soon see. The Eibishter's names are based on what he's doing. This is not just another name, but it's actually Shem Kodesh. And that's Umamshich. That's what the Friedrich Rebbe continues. We learn in the Medrash that the Eibishter says, Shemi atam mevakish leida, Moshe Pashas Kisisa. The Eibishter says, the Moshe Rabbeinu says to the Eibishter, he wants to see the Eibishter, he wants the Eibishter's name. So he says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Shemi atam mevakish leida. You want to know my name? My name changes. Lifi ma'aseh and nikra, depending what I'm doing, is my name. Every one of us has different names. Yes, you have the name that your father gave you by your bris. But to your doctor, you're called a patient. And to your children, you're called father. And to your grandparents, you're called grandson. And to your bank, you're called an account holder. We have many, many different names. Each one of these names are dependent on how we manifest ourselves, what we're doing. When I'm driving a car, I'm a motorist. Each one have different names. So the Eibishter says, you want to know my name? Depending on my actions, that's what I'm being called. When I'm battling with the wicked, that's when I'm called Tzvois. Oh, so what are we saying over here? So the Rebbe, this is the end of quote from Perek Yud Aleph. So first of all, the Rebbe is explaining the structure of the Maimer, which the Rebbe does many, many times. More famous that we're familiar with is in the Maimer of Ata Tetzava, the last Maimer that the Rebbe gave to every one of us. Over there, the whole Maimer is based on how the Rebbe explains the structure of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. So he's saying that the Friedrich Rebbe starts off by telling us that Tzivois is one of the Shemesh Shenim in Chokim, and then he comes and tells us when Tzivois is the Eibishter, when he's called Tzivois is when the Eibishter is fighting with the Rishonim. Why is it relevant to know that Tzivois is one of the Shemesh Shenim in Chokim? So the Rebbe explains, because everything fits, because we are Adam Elyon, and if we have it in down here, that means Adam Elyon also has it. Not just does Adam Elyon have it, but it's one of the Shemesh Shenim in Chokim. What is this shame? This shame is referring to the Eibishter as he is battling the Rishonim. So the Rebbe explains. The explanation is the clothes in Resha. The whole idea of Resha, of evil, is Hepech HaTzedek. Resha is the exact opposite of goodness, of righteousness, of Tzedek. V'hainu, that means she'ein ze. Here we go. She'ein ze derech hayosha. Resha, the opposite of tzedek, means it's not the derech hayosha. It's what's derech hayosha? Derech havaya lasis tzedakah mishpat. Derech hayosha, the straight path, is the path of the Eibishter. What's the path of the Eibishter? To perform tzedakah and mishpat. What is derech hayosha? The derech hayosha hu shaylam yeh mokim shel tainuk. The correct and proper way is that the world should be a place of tainuk. Bosi Legani. The Eibush is coming down to his world, and he refers to his world as what? As a Legani, as a Lignuni, as a place of the Eibush's orchard, a place of the Eibush's pleasure, as it was in the original plan, as it was in the original time of the Eibush, the original plan, when he wanted a Dira B'Tachtenim, he wanted a place of pleasure. The famous Sikha of the Rebbe, Yud Shvat Tavshin Lamed Beis. It's used many, many times in the gem videos. The Rebbe speaks, particularly, it's a Sikha, not in the Maimer. And over there, the Rebbe speaks about the Welt is a Garten. Very optimistic view on this world. In the middle of the Cold War and everything, 1972, with Brezhnev and Nixon and China, it's Freilach. And the Rebbe looks at the world and he says, the Welt is a Garten from the Eibush, the beautiful Sikha. It's on a video. And the Rebbe described what kind of beautiful place the world is, all from this pasuk from this Bosi Legani. So the proper way the world has to be is derech hayosha. She'elam yeh mokim shel tainuk. That was the original time of the Eibishter wanted. I was driving back this morning from Manchester, bringing back I took the kids to school. Some schools are still open, and listening on the radio. I can't remember what it was. There was something. They had some future of an advert, whatever. It dawned on me, and now I realize why everything's Ashgacha Pratis. It dawned on me that all of these futuristic ideas that people have of what's going to be the future is all talking about intergalactical travel. It's all wars. It's all tzaras. It's all problems. The exact opposite of what Torah and through Chassidus and Bosi Legani is telling us that the future only holds good. Seemingly the default position that Elam Hazar says that it's only going to get worse. And that the future only is bad, and there's going to be intergalactical wars and ichvesos. That's not the case. The future is meant to hold good, because the Nisava Kadosh Baruch Hu was a Dira B'Tachtenim in a place of Gani. That was the Eibush wanted. Resha is the opposite of Derech HaYashar. Tzedek is the correct way, and that's what the future is going to hold. However, Yeshnam Elu Shema'afsim is Haderech. There are those who, unfortunately, they deride. The Ma'afsim means crooked, krum. They detour the derech. And that's why they're called Rishonim. So in other words, Rasha doesn't just mean evil, it means Resha, the opposite of tzedek, the opposite of correctness, the opposite of goodness. This is the Indian, really, what Indian of Tzivois, when the Eibish's name is Tzivois, this is what it means. Shem Tzivois. This is what it means when the Medrash says, that what? That he's going to battle evil. He's going to battle that the world should become a Dira B'Tachtenim, should become a place of tzedek and mishpat and yesha. So then the Friedrich Rebbe is mamshich. The Friedrich Rebbe continues. Im can move on. The shem tzvoi is the shem the melchama. Therefore, it's understood. Yes, it will require a war, a battle for the tzedek to win over the resha. And then he brings V'chein Isa b'Shari Eira. Then he brings from a sefer called Shari Eira from Rabbi Yosef Giktelaya. Over there, Rabbi Yosef Giktelaya says in Shari Eira, the Shem Tzvois is Benetzach V'Heid. The name Tzvois, where is it in the map of the Ishtalshalos? So he says that's in the levels of Netzach and Heid. Over there, from there come all of the wars that are in the world, come from Netzach and Heid. Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef Giktelaya, interesting, you can look it up on Wikipedia. So he was a Makubal who lived in the 12th or 13th century in Cordoba, in Spain. And the Arizal writes about him that his Sefer, Shari Eira, is, the Arizal refers to it as the Aleph Beis of Kabbalah. It's interesting because the Mittler Rebbe also wrote a Sefer called Shari Eira, and that's referred to as the Aleph Beis of Chassidus. The last name of Giktilaya, apparently in Spanish it's with a ch sound. Giktilaya, it means like a slang for the small one. It's used today as a term of endearment for a woman, the small one. So the Yosef Giktilaya, the small one. In any case, he was a Makubal then in Spain during the golden era of Yiddishkeit in Spain. So there he says that the name of Tzvois is in Netzach and Heid. Okay. Right, the Friedrich Rebbe explains Netzach and Heid is Chanukah and Purim. Purim and Chanukah, Purim is Netzach and Chanukah is Heid. That's not relevant for our mimer over here. In any case, the point what he's so far telling us is that the Friedrich Rebbe begins Perek Yud Aleph explaining to us the three named interpretations of Tzvois. Tzivos Hashem is referring to the Yidden. What is it referring to the Yidden? Well, it refers to the Eibishter. It refers to the Eibishter as going to battle. So it refers to the Yidden also as going. Which battle? The battle of good over evil, of transforming the world from Resha to Tzedek. Okay. Mamshech. So then the Rebbe continues the analysis of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer. So he goes on to explain what's the connection of Milchama to Netzach. According to the Shari Eira, this Milchama, or the Sherish of all Milchamas, comes from Netzach and Heid. So here, the Friedrich Rebbe zeroes in particular on Netzach. What does Milchama have to do with Netzach? Because Shesivas HaMilchama Bishvil Nitzuach HaMenagid. Because the cause or the reason behind the Milchama is for the victory over the opposition. Now, in action, if you learn Perek Yud Aleph, it's very important that you do learn Perek Yud Aleph. You get a much better understanding of what we're saying here. Over there, the Friedrich Rebbe actually says there's two reasons of why people go to war, of why a country will go to war. He says one could be simply to pillage, to acquire more, like Saddam Hussein did in 1991. He didn't invade Kuwait for any other reason. He wanted the oil, he wanted the money. Then that's one. The second reason the Friedrich Rebbe says there is lahetzi nitzchene. There's an idea of what he's telling us over here, netzach, which he's going to explain. The urge or the desire, the feeling of victory. Not just to pillage and to steal and to increase one's treasure, but to conquer, to achieve netzach. That's what he's telling us over here. Shesivas hamelchama he bishvil nitzuach hamenagid. So the Friedrich Rebbe maybe dugmalas. He brings an example. He brings an example from the method which the king uses in his relationship with the army at the time of the war. And from that mashal, from that mashal, we'll be able to understand how the Eibishter conducts himself with his army at the time of war. How the Eibishter conducts his battle when he is battling with the Rishonim. So the Friedrich Rebbe says, how does the Melech deal? What is tactic when he goes to war? In order to be able to be victorious over the opposition, what does the king do? He's ready, even he's called skulas. He's even ready to be mevazves, to waste, so to speak. Bizbuz means waste, means to splurge. All of the skulas, all the special treasures, the hein yakar, of the very valuable treasures, Hanesav, which have been gathered, and Ve'anikvats, which have been accumulated, b'meshech kama shanim, over numerous years, not just over numerous years during this king's reign, Mideirach hader, from his predecessors, the previous kings. So in a kingdom, over time, there's more and more treasures and valuables that are gathered and accumulated. You have here in England, the crown jewels are kept somewhere safe. Where is it? Tower of London, something like that, or London Bridge, where is it? And it's kept, and they have it mider there, and it's never used. Maybe when the crown, the king or the queen, but otherwise it sits there. But when it comes a situation of milchama, it comes a situation of war, for Netzach, for Nitzuach of the Menagid, he's ready to be mevazves, to pour it all out and use everything, even that which took generations to acquire. Stuff, material, treasures that have never even been used for anything. They are hidden and sealed. No one can even look at them. But when it comes time for the victory to win the war, he's ready to splurge and let everything go. Blank check, everything can go. Then there skips forward a bit. Base milchama peschim misaitzeres. Friedrich continues that at a time of war, the treasure houses are opened. They're given, these treasures are given to the officers, the ones in charge. For what purpose? For the soldiers, they should be able to. They went to.
Rami, you're just breaking up.
Thanks. What happened?
No, we can't hear anything. You've broken up.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Is it better? Yeah. Where was I up to? How long was I broken up?
20 seconds ago.
Oh, so saying when the British went to war with the Americans, so they went with, they barely had boots enough for everybody. The Americans were coming with all the latest technology and all the latest discoveries and developments, and it was a machaya. While the British, there wasn't even enough basic materials for them. So he's saying when it comes to Nitzuach HaMelchama, he's ready to give away everything. That's what the Friedrich Rebbe says. So the Rebbe continues and the Rebbe explains, this is what the Eibishter does. But the same thing applies now by Tzivis Hashem by Yidden also. That watch, so the Eibishter opens up his treasures and he gives to every single Yid his treasures. For what purpose? For the purpose that we're commissioned for. That's what Yidden are here for. We're here to win this war. Which war? The war we said on top of the page of transforming Reshat Tzedek, of making a Direh B'Tachtenim, of transforming the world into a pleasant place, a gan, not just a pleasant place, a delightful place. So that every single Yid should be able to fight the battle of the Eibishter and V'Yinatzeach. It is paraphrasing over here, the Rambam, which speaks about Mashiach. So that every Yid should be able to fight the Melchamis of Hashem V'Yinatzeach, Lasses Lo Yizborach Direh B'Tachtenim. Elsewhere, the Rebbe explains there's a Mashiach in every single one of us. What's the union of Mashiach in what? Every one of us is exactly like the big Mashiach, and that is to Yilchem, Melchemes Hashem V'Yinatzeach, which is what? To make a Dira Lo Yizbarach. Okay, so the Eibishter, for that, he's ready to splurge and give us everything as well. Move on. So now the Rebbe asks a question. Since we're talking over here about a tremendous treasure, a very valuable treasure. That was never, the Eibishter never used it for anything. Even a penny of it. If you're talking about a Gashmi's treasure. Not just, it wasn't used even a penny, it certainly wasn't used in a way of splurging. So it was never used for anything. And it's hidden from the sight of anybody of Ein Kol Raya. No one's even able to see it. It's concealed and hidden inside vaults. If that's the case, in Cain, Mao Atam, what's the reason? It's never used. It never had any benefit. So what now is going to come into benefit? Why now is he ready to splurge it? Is he ready to splurge all the Eitzres? How's it going to become beneficial now? Why? And that's what the Friedrich Rebbe continues. Because nitzochen, the sentiment of victory, is natua umushrash be'etzem hanefesh, is something which is deeply ingrained within one's etzem of one's nefesh. Even higher than one's keches hagluyim. Netzach is unique, right? We talk about the keches hanefesh, chesed, gvura, tiferes, chochma, bina, das, right? There's 10 keches hanefesh we learned in Chitas recently. Netzach is unique that in a sense it's deeply ingrained and embedded more than anything else. When it comes to a matter of Netzach, as I'll explain, that people are ready. Sadly, we usually see it. Sadly, where people are ready to, when it comes, people get sick from a grudge because they lost something, and they're angry at somebody, and they have a faribel, and they can make themselves sick. And the therapists tell people with grudges, stop wasting emotional energy on the one whom you have the grudge. Don't give this person rent-free space in your head. That person has moved on with their life, and you are still cranking from the faribel, from the breakers that you have with them. Where does this come from? It comes from Midas HaNetzach. That's a negative example of Midas HaNetzach, that there's this deep drive to win. When someone is goal-oriented, they call it today. If your person is goal-oriented, he'll do everything that needs to be done. It has to be done. Famous story from the Chafetz Chaim. The Rebbe said it by Fabrengen, Toshin and Beis. There was a decree. The government, once again, happened many times. The government in Poland wanted to interfere in the way the Jewish schools worked. So the Chafetz Chaim sent a delegation to go and try and change things and fix things. And they came back, and unfortunately, they were not successful. So the Chafetz Chaim said to them, did you try this? Did you try that tactic? Did you try this? Nothing helped. And at the end, and the Rebbe shouted this out. The Rebbe says, the Chafetz Chaim says, hast du gechalisht? Did you faint? You tried everything, but did you faint? In other words, was it negeya to your etzem hanefesh? That's an example for this nitzach, midas hanitzachon that he's telling us over here. Lefish hanitzachon is natua umushrash be'etzem hanefesh l'mayla yesem keches hagluyim shebenefesh. Nitzachon is embedded deep within us. That means shu l'mayla ma'ir v'chayis sheba begilui. Midas hanetzach, nitzachon is something which is much higher than any of the eir and chayis that comes begilui. Chochma, to share wisdom, to think chochma, to do chesed. It's all very nice, but are we going to kill ourselves to do chesed? Are we ready to do anything in order to be able to do chesed with somebody? If they don't want, finish. I'm trying to help you. I'm going to help you. What can I do? To what extremes would one go to perform chesed? But when it comes to midas hanetzach, the extreme is that you're ready to splurge everything. And therefore he says, so since netzach is embedded higher than all the keches hagluyim, v'lachein kol ha'eineg hanelev hanifla sheyesh b'sgulas malchusei v'eitzeres yikare, all of the great eineg, the great pleasure that there is in being a melech, and the glory of the kingdom and the royalty and everything, which is of course tremendous eineg. And it's from the eineg is from the royalty and also from the eitzeres, for which reason shalachein enim evazah. That's why he doesn't use them. He doesn't splurge them, and he doesn't mishtamish. He doesn't even use them klal at all. But all of that, Eineg Tefis Mokim, doesn't take any space. It's of no significance, klal at all, Legabe Nitzachim. Netzach is higher than all of that. All the delight that the Melech has in his kingdom and in his treasure and in everything else becomes insignificant when it comes to Nitzachim. And therefore, because it's insignificant, that's why he's ready to splurge it. Something that's significant, Taka won't splurge. But in the face of Netzach, it becomes insignificant. And therefore, for the winning of the victory of the war, the Melech is ready to waste and to splurge all of his treasures. Because the more you appreciate Netzach, the more you appreciate everything else is insignificant. And therefore, everything is justified for the goal of Netzach. Nitzachim. Furthermore, we say to him, Shagam, not just is he ready to splurge all of the treasures which no one ever saw, which have been accumulated over generations, which have never been used, etc. It's even more than that. Says, Shagam, the king is even ready to put his own life on the line. He's not a king who leads from the back. He's even ready to go in the front and even to give up his own life for this netzach. This just drives home even more so how deeply embedded netzach is. All of this is because of the tremendously high level of netzach in its shadish and mocker. That's why it reaches and touches within the melech in a much deeper and much more powerful way, more so than anything else in his kingdom. In fact, it even touches something more higher and more important than his own life. That's the midah of netzach. Again, we don't have examples of this today. The only examples we have, unfortunately, is in the negative, when people are even ready to make themselves krank. they unfortunately become sick from bregas and a grudge and animosity and so on, and it affects their health. And that's mashlich chayev mineged. Be healthy, forget about it, and don't let it affect your health. Whatever it is that's disturbing us. And yet we're ready to do that. That's an example of mashlich chayev mineged for nonsense. Here, we'll give you an example of mashlich chayev mineged for midas hanetzach and the positive for this nitzachon that the king has to have. Okay. Perek Gimel. That is what the Friedrich Rebbe is saying over there in Perek Yud Aleph, with the Rebbe's explanations between the lines there. Literally. Move on. Now we need to understand. Fine, we need to understand. That's very good. It makes sense. Netzach by a melech. It makes sense. Netzach by people. We're talking about the Eibishter. What netzach does the Eibishter have? Which opposition does the Eibishter have that he has to splurge all of his treasures and he has to use all of these extra resources? The Eibishter has someone who can oppose him, that he needs to bring out the heavies. He has to bring out the heavy guns. He has to open up his treasure houses. What does that mean? What does it mean? Mashlich chayev mineged by the Eibishter. Mashayich inyan hanetzach l'mayla. It's the melech malach emochem hakadosh baruch hu asher mi yemelei matasa. The Eibishter, who as the pasuk says, who can tell the Eibishter what to do? The Eibishter is the Eibishter. Ve'ez tfisas mokem yesh letzli v'chol inyan built it to him. Any negativity inyan built it to him. What space do they take? What significance are they before the Eibishter? And then he has to now reach deep within his treasure to be able to battle it. It's the Eibishter here. It works in the mashal, but how does it work in the nimshal? So the explanation will understand by taking a quote from the Rebbe Marash. Now, important to remember that every year, in all the Bosi Legani Maimorim, the Rebbe would bring a quote from every one of the Rabbeim. And then later on from the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid as well. And then in the later years, even from his father, from the Rebbe Levi Yitzchak. Not necessarily in the order of all the Rabbeim, but he brought a quote from everyone. So here he starts with the Rebbe Marash. In his Maimer of Tafresh Chav Zayin, Tzitkas Pirzeini. So he says, the Rebbe Marash says in Avot, the Lochein Nemer V'gam Netzach Yisrael, Shanitzachon Mishal Yisrael. This is the pasuk where Shmuel Hanavi is telling Shaul HaMelech, when Shaul HaMelech is losing his position as Melech after the incident then with Amalek. And Shaul Hanavi is trying to make up and is asking for forgiveness and so on. And Shmuel Hanavi tells him that the Eibishter Netzach Yisrael, that the Eibishter is eternal and doesn't change. It's not like the Eibishter can change his mind. That's the way it is. Netzach Yisrael, the eternal one of Yisrael. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is that the Eibishter is the eternal one of Yisrael. So the Rebbe Marash explains it in a deeper, an alternate interpretation. Netzach Yisrael, that the Eibishter is the Nitzach, that Shanitzachenu shel Yisrael. That the Nitzachon is Yisrael. That the Eibishter's victory is when the Yidden are victorious. And so the Rebbe is going to borrow that inside that interpretation of the pasuk to start answering our question. Of course, the Eibishter doesn't have Nitzachon. The Eibishter doesn't have Melchama. The Eibishter doesn't have Menagid. So then, what is the Eibishter's Nitzachon? What's the Eibishter's Netzach? So let's borrow this idea from the Rebbe Marash. Nitzachon is Shel Yisrael, as the Rebbe explains. Even though by the Eibishter is not Shaykh in Nitzachon. We call Mokim nonetheless. There is, however, a need of victory for Yidden. So then, this is the pasuk over there from Shmuel. Then, so because there needs to be a nitzuach for Yidden down here, that happens l'mayla, that is netzach Yisrael lo yishakev lo yinachim, which is what Shmuel says to show. The Eibishter doesn't change, it isn't comforted, it doesn't lie, it remains. That's the nitzachim. So therefore, in other words, the question was, what nitzachim is there by the Eibishter? The answer is, the nitzachim l'mayla is netzach Yisrael, the nitzachim of Yidden. What does that mean? The explanation is the as we said earlier, Yidden are compared. We are models of the Eibishter Adam Elyon. But nonetheless, we're Taka Adam Elyon, but we're down here. Nimtzoy Lamata. Adam Elyon up there would be great, but we're here. Nimtzoy Lamata. This is the whole idea of the descent of the neshama. We're down to Amata. And we're in the Mata, as it says in Pasuk in Eichel, down into this dark place. And what does the neshama send down into this dark place for? To perform her mission of the neshama, together with her partner, is the nefesh habamis, which is even cause a bigger problem. And what is the mission? The mission is not just to do the Aveda, but Ba'ef and the Aveda has to be done in a way of the Acharecha Narutza, on the plural, that we should run after the Eibishter, Loshen Rabim, that the Nefesh Elokis should impact the Nefesh Habamis, so the Nefesh Habamis should join and come on board with the mission of the Nefesh Elokis. The Pasuk, the Acharecha Narutza, is a Pasuk in Shir HaShirim. And over there it says in the Pesach Maimorim, in the Maimorim Sfiras HaOmer, it says, that Meshcheni Acharecha Narutza Heviane HaMelech HaDorach. It's talking about the whole process from Pesach till Shavuos. Meshcheni is draw me or drag me. The Eibishter schlepped us out of Mitzrayim. Acharecha Narutza, after you, Narutza, we will run. It means through the Aveda, Sfiras HaOmer, Birin HaMides. So it's not just in the neshama. The neshama, of course, wants to leave Mitzrayim. The neshama wants to come close to the Eibishter. The nefesh habamis as well. That's the Aveda of Sfiras HaOmer. Acharecha Narutza, that we should run to the Eibishter. Loshen Rabim. So the neshama is taka Adam Elyon, but it has to come down into this world, into darkness, machshakim, to do the Aveda with the nefesh habamis, to achieve Acharecha Narutza Loshen Rabim, u'lesakin v'chumri, and to correct and fix this gashmistic world. As he says in Tanya, Beitz Chaim, Shanashama Atzma, Eina Tzlicha Tikkun Klal, Shama is fine. Doesn't need a tikkun. You only need it to establish in this world, to make a tikkun for the Elam, not for the Neshama. Las is dira, to make a dira. And therefore, we keep on since we need to make a bitter in a physical, mundane object, so that through that we should be able to have Istalik means a dispersion of the Yikara, of the glory of the Shechina of the Eibishter. And then by days first there has to be the Skafia of Gashmias through the Acharecha Narutza Loshen Rabim. We need the help of the Nefesh Habamis. That is going to allow for the Yikar of the Eibishter to be Istalik throughout all the worlds. That's going to achieve an Ishapcha, a transformation of darkness to light and bitterness to sweet, i.e., Lasis Misheker Ha'olam Keresh L'Mishkan, which we spoke about earlier. To transform the lie of the world, not to destroy the world, to reveal the sheker that is in the world and reveal that this is really a Keresh. This is really a support beam for the Mishkan, for the Shechina, for the Eibishter, for the Dira B'Tachtenim. The Lasis Miklos and Yana Elam Dira Lo Yizbarich. And to take all of the material, all of the components of the world and turn it into a Dira. This is the victory. This is the intended victory for which all of the eitzidus of the Eibishter are being revealed. So we started off the paragraph saying what nitzachin is there by the Eibishter, and the answer is that in Eibishter's nitzachin is that Yidden should win. And for that, he is ready to give everything. What is the everything? That we're going to carry on next week in the continuation of Maimon. He's going to explain, as he says in the next line, what then is the eitzah? So we understand now what is the mission. We understand how to do the mission. Now, what is exactly the oitza that Eibush is giving us, the tools, the weapons with which we should be able to fulfill this mission. Have a great